Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Jack Douglas. Each week we present armchair vacations to different areas of America, and each week we are forced to leave out, because of the lack of time, many and sometimes dozens of interesting and unusual places, people, and things. So tonight, we thought you might like to see some of the attractions you did not see but should have seen on previous programs. Don't ask me to repeat that, but I do believe you'll enjoy the special Armchair Vacation 2, Everywhere, USA. You and I have been invited to a real, old-fashioned New England clam bake. We're at Yarmouth on Cape Cod, and this annual bake is sponsored by the Bass River Rodin Gun Club of Yarmouth to raise money for club expenses. Well, the clam bake committee has been at work since just before dawn, because every guest will be served the following. Hear this: clams, lobster, 2 ears of corn, 2 potatoes, 2 sweet potatoes, 2 onions, 2 wieners, and 2 sausages. The picnic tables are covered over with gaily colored paper, and large stones are then tossed into the huge fire. Now, these heated stones, not the fire itself, will steam bake the goodies. Superheated, the stones are spread out and leveled. And now, you barbecuing fans, watch this operation closely. Wet seaweed is tossed over the hot stones until the seaweed pile is 2 feet thick. Next, the baskets of food are added to the seaweed pile, everything except the lobsters, and then these are covered with a sheet. The lobsters, and only the lobsters, are placed atop the sheet, and then a wet canvas is placed over the lobsters and secured around the edges so that none of the steam can escape. Now, the vapor from the clams and seaweed goes up, the juice from the lobsters goes down, producing a unique and unbeatable flavor to all the goodies. Well, at last the hour is up, the canvas is removed, and the delicious aroma is enough to drive a person crazy. Presto, the chow line is a mile long. Yes, they had watermelon too on top of everything else, and we left this New England clam bake with a light head, a terribly heavy tummy, but a happy promise to be back again next year. Also at Cape Cod and Chatham, be sure to stop at the Christopher Ryder House, an excellent New England dining spot which also features a first-rate musical revue. These are the Happy Banjo Hobos of Holliston, Massachusetts, a group organized 5 or 6 years ago and rapidly achieving national fame. A change of pace now with Otis and Susan Stevens. And now the Happy Banjo Hobos rip out a rousing finale. The CAMPTOWN races, popularized in song, do exist. They take place in May at Ashland, Virginia, and the crowds are tremendous. I guess the CAMPTOWN could be called Virginia's answer to the Western Rodeo. The atmosphere is festive, balloon sellers are everywhere, and since it's going to be a long day, not a few people will pack picnic baskets. Meantime, the youngsters are attracted to a 40-year-old steam engine that used to run a lumber mill and still operates as well as ever. The Patrick Henry Clay High School Band serenades the crowd with loud enthusiasm. The Sun Dodgers hide under a myriad of rainbow colors. And as for headgear, you name it, and you'll see it here at the CAMPTOWN races. The hunter's relay is a team effort. A riding crop is handed from one rider to the waiting rider. The last race is the traditional silver dollar race. A small sack full of silver dollars is suspended just above the finish line. Now, this is a mule race, by the way, and the sack of dollars will go to whichever rider manages to grab the sack while still astride his mule. The first one across the finish line doesn't necessarily win the dollars. Well, the first three to cross the finish line missed the sack, but the rider in the foreground caught the prize. Then the sack broke open and the dollars spilled out. He doesn't mind picking them up, though, assisted by hero-worshipping small fry. All except one. Still in Virginia, we're now at Hampton Roads, and we've come here to visit old Fort Monroe to learn of an important but little-known sidelight to American history. Here, 5 weeks after the assassination of President Lincoln, Jefferson Davis, the President of the Confederacy, was imprisoned, accused of having plotted Mr. Lincoln's death. In the North, powerful figures such as Horace Greeley ultimately secured Mr. Davis's release from prison. But in this cell, Jefferson Davis wasted 2 full years of his life, falsely accused by a man known to be a master perjurer. After his release, Mr. Davis spent a busy and apparently a happy life and lived to the ripe age of 81. There is history of a different type in Abingdon, Virginia, and the sign on a pole is a clue: Slow Actors Crossing. Well, the building in the background is the object of our attention, the world-famous Barter Theater, conceived in the Depression year of 1932 by an unemployed Broadway actor who offered local farmers the chance to see a play for 40 cents, or the equivalent in produce. That first year, the Barter Theater netted only $4.30 cash, but as this old photo indicates, the actors at least had plenty to eat. Mr. Bob Porterfield, the actor, director, producer who founded the Barter Theater, here describes the theater's unusual but highly respected annual award.
Since 1939, the Barter Theater has been presenting an award to the outstanding person in the New York theater. The award consists of a Virginia ham, a platter to eat it from, and an acre of land on the side of the mountain near the Barter Theater. And last year, when Abe Burroughs won the award, he found out that his acre was right alongside of Tallulah Bankhead's. And he remarked, couldn't I have a quieter acre?
Winners of the Barter Ham Award have included some of the most distinguished stars of yesterday and today, including some of its own alumni, such as Gregory Peck and Ernest Borgnine. Today, the admission at the Barter is real folding money, not ordinary lettuce, but you'll be rewarded with the very best in the dramatic arts. No, the circus is not in town, but don't go away. This is part of the Harry Hertzberg Circus Museum at the Public Library in San Antonio, Texas. Entering the museum, we're greeted by a mechanical clown. It would take at least several hours to show all of the circus mementos in the Hertzberg collection. Posters, real circus wagons painted white and gold, and those alluring handbills depicting the star attractions of yesteryear in circus land. And here's the gem of the collection, the actual, real-size carriage built by the great P.T. Barnum for his famous midget, Tom Thumb. It's hard to imagine a human being so small that he could ride comfortably in such a tiny vehicle. Well, most of the circuses of yesterday are gone now, but they've been replaced by outdoor exhibits all over the country, such as Ross Allen's Reptile Institute at Silver Springs, Florida. Now listen to Ross.
This is the eastern diamondback rattlesnake, the most dangerous snake in the eastern United States. They attain a length of 7 feet, and they can strike out 2/3 of their own length. They can strike half their length up in the air. And they can bite or strike from any position, best when they're coiled. If stretched out straight, they can make a short strike, turn and bite your foot if you happen to step on one, and they can bite underwater as well as coil and strike from the surface of the water. Now, I want to make one strike a balloon. In order to do that, he has to open his mouth up very wide, strike forward, hit the balloon with the tip end of the fangs, and then recoil, and he's ready to strike again.
The rattler seems indifferent to the gentle prodding and the balloon, but when it strikes with dazzling speed. From Florida, we've journeyed to northeastern Arizona and a forest as strange as any on Earth. This is just a small part of the 95,000 acres that make up the Petrified Forest National Park. Now, once upon a time, roughly 160 million years ago, this arid area was a lush, swampy lowland. Now, eventually, the swamp waters disappeared, the dead and fallen trees sank in sand and silt rich in silica, and the silica found its way into the wood, replacing the water and air content of the trees, filling the wood solidly, and forming thereby petrified logs that are literally as hard as stone. Here at the Park Museum, they showed us sample cutaways proving that the logs have turned to stone. Now, it took 2 days, for example, using diamond disc saws to make just this cut, and 13 more days to polish it. Here are more samples full of rainbow colors caused by oxides of iron and manganese. The main colors, by the way, are blue, black, purple, yellow, orange, rust, and red. Most visitors to the Petrified Forest experience the odd sensation of feeling that time is standing still. For how does one measure minutes and hours against 160 million years? Our special vacation variety show continues in just a few moments. Right now, this message from our sponsor. Still in the Petrified Forest, this young couple walks on a petrified log 100 feet long and known as the Agate Bridge. This stairway built into the rock leads to a concrete platform and a peak known as Newspaper Rock. And just a few feet away, picture writing, Indian petroglyphs have been pecked into the surface of a huge sandstone block. These particular petroglyphs cannot be accurately interpreted, but more than likely, they record important events in the lives of Indians who at one time, perhaps 600 years ago, lived in this region. The Spanish conquistadors who first discovered the Southwest in search of gold were indeed a strange breed of men, capable of savage deeds one day while piously proclaiming the kingdom of heaven the next. But with the cross, the conquistadors brought a magnificent form of architecture ideally suited to this dry, sunny climate. For example, this is the mission of San Javier, 9 miles south of Tucson. Not only one of the most beautiful, but also the best preserved of the Spanish missions in America. The foundation for the mission was laid in the year 1700, and it was named after St. Francis Xavier, the renowned apostle of the Indies. Vacationers are surprised to see a cat and a mouse carved at separate ends of the facade. Well, the builders had a sense of humor, depicting an old Indian proverb which says, "When cat catches mouse, end of world will come." We're happy to report that the cat and mouse haven't moved an inch in almost 300 years. The desert architecture of today, indeed much of American architecture, bears the unmistakable stamp of one man and one alone, the late great Frank Lloyd Wright, the man whose name was known and respected by more people than any other architect or builder in mankind's history. Taliesin West is just one of hundreds of lasting monuments Wright left behind. Located near Phoenix, Taliesin West was built by the master builder as a school and a meeting place for the creative young minds who would design the world of tomorrow. And here are glimpses of what that world will look like as conceived by the students and the commercial architects of Taliesin West. Taliesin West is one of the smaller structures designed by Frank Lloyd Wright, yet even here he exercised one of his classic beliefs, that a building should be a part of its natural surrounding and blend with it. And here also he demonstrated his genius in the use of functional, he called it organic, interior space. Today, Mrs. Wright is the guiding spirit of Taliesin West, torchlighting her late husband's passionate obsession to combine beauty with perfection. Taliesin can accommodate about 75 of the thousands of applicants who wish to be students. These are some of the lucky few, each one interviewed and screened by Mrs. Wright personally. They will, as the years pass, try to become what Mrs. Wright calls the artist who is the complete man. Now each year, Taliesin West welcomes thousands of vacationers and sightseers. Most of them know little about designing and building. They come instead to walk in the giant footsteps of a man who walked in beauty and wanted nothing more than to share the beauty of his visions with his fellow man. We left Taliesin West shortly after sundown, but I like to think that we took the memory of the complete man back home with us. This now is the red rock country of Oak Creek Canyon near Sedona, Arizona, and suddenly you see it, the Chapel of the Holy Cross, considered by many the most stunning chapel of modern times in all America. What an imposing structure it is. It's not really a monument to one faith, but to the concept of the one God. There isn't much more to say. You look at it, and you go your way. But having seen it, you'll not soon forget it. The great masterpiece in Lake Wales, Florida, is yet another of America's unusual sightseeing religious attractions. Actually, except for the subject matter, it is more art than religion. An enormous mosaic of Leonardo da Vinci's Last Supper. Made of more than 300,000, that's right, 300,000 pieces of mosaic, the great masterpiece blends 10,000 gradations of color, mostly in soft pastels. This extraordinary work was made in Germany. It involved 2 years of planning, and hear this, 27,000 man-hours of assembly time. So if you're visiting Florida, it's well worth a side trip to Lake Wales to see this great masterpiece. Along similar lines, the Lord's Supper, recreated in wax but also modeled after Da Vinci's painting, took our cameras to this free exhibit on Sunset Drive in Fort Worth, Texas. The exhibit, a contribution to Fort Worth by private citizens, is the work of the Catherine Stubergs, mother and daughter of Los Angeles, California. The Stubergs spent 18 months in creating the life-size wax tableau, and we must marvel at their skill and patience, for the hair and beard of each head involved the careful placing of 40,000 human hairs. 40,000 human hairs for each head and beard. We placed a camera behind the figures and caught this emotional reaction of one of the visitors, a tribute to the lifelike quality of this excellent wax work. You know, in recent years, wax museums have enjoyed a sudden and apparently a lasting popularity, and Philadelphia has one of the best, the American Wax Museum. These Indians are part of the tableau reenacting William Penn's famed treaty with them. In wax, we relive those magnificent moments when patriots gathered to draft the Declaration of Independence, which, however, was first conceived by the brilliant Thomas Jefferson. Also present in this grouping are Benjamin Franklin, Roger Sherman, and John Adams standing. More realistic than any painting is the tableau showing Washington's unforgettable crossing of the Delaware. And a Philadelphia museum could hardly bypass Miss Betsy Ross sitting alone sewing the flag of the 13 colonies. John James Audubon, the painter, is represented, and so are Edgar Allan Poe and the venerated Walt Whitman. Great men, great women, great historic incidents. You'll find them by the dozen at the American Wax Museum. Also in Philadelphia, the Rodin Museum offers you the chance of a lifetime, a chance to see bronze casts and other replicas of some of the finest sculpturing of the 19th and 20th centuries, the work of the celebrated French sculptor François-Auguste René Rodin, born in Paris in 1840 and died in 1917. And no man can learn to sculpt like this, for Rodin's was a God-given gift. This is a head of Balzac, the athlete, meditation, the hand from the tomb. These hands in prayer symbolize the cathedral. And here in The Kiss, Rodin achieved one of the most sensually exciting sculptures of all time. And yet there is a wholesome, virtuous quality in the work. Truly a masterpiece. Well, there are museums and museums, but the Rodin Museum in Philadelphia does warrant your special consideration. You may recall that we visited Custer Battlefield in Montana during our special program of a few months ago, Fields of Glory. Briefly, we retold the story of the Battle of the Little Bighorn and of the massacre that took place on the slopes and ridges overlooking the Little Bighorn River. But there wasn't time for an interesting sidelight at Custer Battlefield, the Visitor Center, which incidentally flies its flag at half-mast in memory of the flamboyant Custer and his loyal troops who fought to the last man. Inside the center are mementos of the battle, revolvers, carbines, and ammunition belts that were found on the hillside where Custer fell. Also on exhibit are some of the weapons used by the Indians under Chief Crazy Horse and the Medicine Man Sitting Bull. Notice that the Indians also had carbine rifles, plus the expected bows and arrows, a skinning or scalping knife, and the whirling two-piece war club. Weapons of war and remembrances of fallen heroes, chapels built in the rock, and rock that was once a living thing. Happy times, good times, these and 10,000 joys are yours, ladies and gentlemen, when you travel anywhere and everywhere, USA. Well, ladies and gentlemen, now you have an idea of what our staff goes through in trying to make up each week's America program, and the problem is always the same: how to show everything when we know that there isn't time to show everything. And in the final analysis, you are the one who really decides. Your letters of suggestion are very valuable to us, and in many cases, our viewers have tipped us off to new things, new attractions that we knew nothing about. And now this is Jack Douglas saying, I hope we'll meet again next week at the same time, somewhere in America. Until then, thank you so much and good night, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls.